Okay, I'm recording it now.
It's starting. Yes, it's starting right now.
Yeah.
Sure, I will do so. Okay, bye.
Hi, Bing. We can hear you, Bing.
I'm sorry. That was my sister calling from Hawaii saying that, asking me to send the link to her. So
Oh,
I guess I will try and do that for her. It is, however, 2 o'clock. So
yeah.
those of you that are here are welcome to this inaugural public meeting of the Lauren Eiseley Society. Um, so this is a grand experiment on our part, and we hope that you find it both informative and educational, and get to meet some old friends and make some new ones along the way. I see our opera singer John Cimino has joined us,
Let's see.
and our former member of our board, Susan Maher from the University of Minnesota Duluth. So delighted that you could join both of you could join us, and this is this is going to be quite a little reunion here among many old friends. I see Lee Shriver also. So um, many of you are old friends of mine. I don't think I know you, David. So where are you at? And
You say David. I don't know if you're referring to me or not. I'm a
yes,
stranger. I'm David Kane, and I'm in Spotsylvania, Virginia.
furthest distance right now among all the people that have dialed in.
Well, unless the Hawaii connection makes it.
Yes.
In any case, I'm midway between Washington, D.C. and Richmond.
Wonderful.
And a longtime member of the Lauren Eiseley Society, although I have not in any way been active, and I'm delighted to have this opportunity. I was delighted to meet Lauren Eiseley when he lectured, I think it was in Woolsey Hall at Yale University, academic year 1966-67. But I read a passage, the Neanderthal man passage, which I consider magnificent, from The Firmament of Time to my students for 44 years. And I never get tired of being moved by that passage. I'm sure you all know it.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, what did you teach, David?
I taught religion. I'm a Christian theologian, but nobody's perfect.
Well, thank you for joining us today. So looks like we're gonna have quite a cast of characters here, and I asked our vice president, Tom Lynch, to provide us with the inaugural national meeting, you might say, and I'm looking forward to some others joining us in hopefully sometime during the presentation. So with that, it's good to see so many dear friends and new friends. It's my task to first to offer you my welcome before I introduce our speaker, who's sitting there right in the middle of my screen, Dr. Tom Lynch, who is with the English department here at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. And Tom's presentation, I think I'll just let him go ahead and get started. Tom, you want to take it away?
Okay, sure. So this is based on what I think you can see on the screen is a website called Lauren Eiseley's Nebraska. This began about 6 years ago. I was asked to do what in this area that's called the OLLI classes. It's an adult learning program, continuing ed program. They asked me if I could do a program on Eiseley's Lincoln, and I thought, sure, I could do that. The Heritage Room at the public library here had put together a map, and the Eiseley Society had also put together a map of the key locations in Nebraska for Lauren. So so I had some basis for doing that. And when I was thinking about where to go and how to get around, we were using a big bus too, so I had to make sure we were on the streets, we could get around the corners and stuff. I started using Google Earth just to kind of zoom in on places and zoom back and get a sense of the lay of the land. And I thought, boy, wouldn't it be cool to have some kind of a site? I had originally thought just doing it on Google Earth platform, but I was dissuaded from that. But at least some kind of a website where you could zoom in and zoom out and look at the map and sort of follow Eiseley around. Um, so so that was sort of the initial basis for this project idea. And I had a couple of graduate students who I thought might be good to work on and also in need of money. So if I could raise money, I could pay them. One of them was Emily Rao, who I knew from class was very interested in maps. She'd done a lot of, she'd actually written her course assignment about maps and environmental literature. And she also had digital skills because she's working, her regular job is working for the Cather Project. She's helping to digitize the Cather archives. So, so I asked her if she would be interested in helping out with this, and she said sure, she would do that. And then I also had another student named Ariana Brocious, who I knew worked for Nebraska Educational Telecommunications. She was on the radio in the state all the time, and I knew she had a professional voice, unlike mine. And she also knew how to do sound editing. So, so I asked her as well, and she also agreed to participate, mainly sort of behind the scenes. Well, her voice, I got her to be the voice of Eiseley. So I thought it was kind of interesting to have a female voice reading Eiseley's works there, a little twist there. So I got those folks involved. The Eiseley Society agreed to help fund this. And then I got some funding from Nebraska Humanities. That sort of, we did a matching thing. So that, and all the money I raised, I used to pay the two students. I didn't cover any expenses with it or anything like that. This was absolutely a shoestring budget project. You wouldn't believe how shoestring budget it was. English professors give universities a lot of bang for the buck. All right, we can do more with less than most faculty. So in any case, so Emily set up what's called an ArcGIS system, which is the map, and then you can embed videos into those maps. So that's what we decided to do. So we identified sites in Lincoln and then in Western Nebraska that are important in Eiseley's life and in his writing. And then I went through and found accompanying texts that this is sort of what I'd done for the Ollie field trip in Lincoln, was I'd found passages in Eiseley's writing or in Gail Christensen's biography of Eiseley that were relevant to those particular locations, right? So we did that. I put those together. And then we used a little Samsung mini camera. And I realized this fall, I made some videos for my class because I was teaching all online this semester. And the videos I made, I did with my camera. And I actually think my camera has probably got better quality video than the little camera we use for this project. And if I did something like this again, I just go with the iPhone camera and it's actually higher quality. But in any case, we used this little Samsung mini cam that I had. So, we identified the locations in Lincoln. I made it obvious on the project here that these homes, any of the homes, are private homes with people living in them. Don't go knocking on the door saying you want to look inside Eiseley's house, right? Don't do that. Leave them alone. I even felt a little weird standing outside filming people's houses, right? Hoping nobody'd come out and wonder what the hell was going on. I don't know if any of the people who are in Eiseley's house, houses relevant to Eiseley's life, even know that's what they're doing. I don't know if they even know that. So anyhow, so we did that. And then out west, in Western Nebraska, some of the places we went to were on public land, like the Wildcat Hills area. But some of them were on private land. The Innocent Assassin skull site where we estimate the innocent assassin's skull was found. We don't have it down to the exact location, but we're pretty sure within, quarter mile or so. I think we can get pretty close to where it was discovered. That's on a ranch. That's on somebody's ranch. So we had to get permission from the ranchers to let us do that. So we arranged that to get that permission. The last Neanderthal site, that's also where the Rhino Quarry site is. We got an okay from the landlord, like the owner, but the landlord didn't notify the tenant, right? So we go, and it's up this long dirt road. It's pretty remote to that last Neanderthal site. We go up there and I go knock on the door, and the guy's like, who the heck are you? But the fortunate thing is, Eiseley folks have been out there before, right? Like when we did it about 12 years ago, the Eiseley Society in some of the schools in Western Nebraska organized a tour, and we went up there. So it's the same tenant, right? So he knew what was going on, and he said, fine. The landlord should have let me know, but you guys can look around. So we did some filming out there as well. He also had this border collie puppy that followed us around everywhere. I was almost afraid it was gonna. We had to like hand it back to him to make sure it didn't try to get in the car with us when we left. So anyhow, so we got, we filmed out there as well. An interesting about that location is when Eiseley was there, and he describes the family that the girl he calls the last Neanderthal was a part of, that family actually charged the university money to be allowed to dig on their property. And with that money that they made off of these several summers of the university digging out there, they built themselves a new, it's still a sod house. They were living in a soddy when Eiseley was there. They built themselves a new sod house. You'd never know it was a sod house. It's plastered, and it doesn't look like it's made out of sod at all. And that's still the house that's there. That's still the house that the tenant was living in there. So they built that house with the money that they made off of Eiseley's, the South Party out there quarrying. So let's see. All right. So in terms of music, you can scroll down here and see the project, some of the people involved, Emily and Ariana. Oh, Karen Dalzio. So we also arranged for we have at the university here what's called the Center for Digital Research in the Humanities, which is really world class. I mean, I can say that because I'm bragging it because I didn't have anything to do with it. It's really a world-class center for digital humanities work. And they have a platform for sort of like small projects like this one, right? Mostly they do things like the Whitman Archives and the Cather Project, that they've got these big projects that they get, hundreds of thousands of dollars from the NEH to put up. But they also have kind of they allow smaller projects. So we got them to agree to host us. So that's where this site is. That's what the CDRH sites up there means. They agreed to do that. And then, so Karen works for them. So she designed the actual look of the, this look of the site there. That's Chimney Rock there. So she did that. And then we thought, well, we need some kind of music, kind of intro and outro to each of the pieces there, some kind of sound continuity, and thought about it. And I remembered there had been this guy in Lincoln years back who actually my son had taken guitar lessons from, which was how I knew him. But he was a classical composer, a contemporary classical composer named Rusty Banks. And he had done a piece for Nebraska Educational Television called Ashfall, based on the Ashfall fossil beds. Which is, if you're familiar with that, there was a huge volcanic eruption and all these creatures died in the ashfall there. So if you go there, you can see them digging up all the bones there. So I don't know that Eiseley ever went there, but it clearly the same theme, right? The same idea. And it turned out Rusty was also, I actually believe he originally had wanted to do an Eiseley piece, but he was commissioned to do the Ashfall one, which was close enough in his mind to the spirit of Eiseley that he chose to do that. So the music is that you hear is by him. called Ashfall. And it is admittedly a bit melancholy, but Eiseley's kind of a melancholy writer as well. So I actually think it kind of fits the mood well enough. Well, let me see here if we can pull this up. View the project. I'll do that. You can enter the project several ways. I don't know why that photo is not available. It's not really important, but so as you can see, well, if you look here, you can see the map, and we've got all these numbered locations. Toadstool Parkway up there. You can zoom in on Lincoln here, and you can either click on the sites, or you can go down at the bottom here and scroll through. These are supposed to have images on them, and I'm not sure if it's just loading slow or if I need to ask the site about it. But anyhow, I thought what I would do now is play 5 or 6 of these. They're 3 to 4 minutes long, and then when I get done with that, if you have questions or anything you want to ask me about it that I might be able to answer, I'll be glad to do that. So I believe we have these set up so that you can hear them. Let me make it large too. After moving from the house on South Street, the Eisleys spent a year in Aurora, Nebraska. When they returned to Lincoln, they settled in the house at 2116 South 22nd Street. Again, Eiseley's home life was difficult, and years later, he remembered his time in this house in a bitter poem, Return to a House, that is reprinted in the Lost Notebooks of Lauren Eiseley.
To come into this house where none may grow, save crookedly by malice from within, to sit again at table with the thin and starveling brothers of my name, to know on this side madness, on the other slow and groveling cowardice, no wrathful sin could ever question, is iron discipline. I grant you that. Now let the midnight blow. Call up the circle of the darker hells. I, in the midmost and most fiery pit, outstare these damned, eat fire, know well what pain knifes the frail heart, yet calmly sit and read from each what his dread gesture tells, smile in mad eyes, and fancy I am sane.
One of Eiseley's strongest memories of his time in the 22nd Street house involves the small gold crosses he painted and set up in the backyard. In his autobiography, All the Strange Hours, he describes these crosses in a conversation with the famed poet W.H. Auden.
Then there was the period of the golden crosses, I added. Later, in another house, I had found a little bottle of liquid gilt my mother used on picture frames. I made some crosses, carefully whittled out of wood, and gilded them till they were gold. Then I placed them over an occasional dead bird I buried. Or, if I read of a tragic, heroic death, like those of the war aces, I would put the clipping, I could read by then, into a little box and bury it with a gold cross to mark the spot. One day, a mower in the empty lot behind our backyard found the little cemetery and carried away all of my carefully carved crosses. I cried, but I never told anyone. How could I? I had sought in my own small way to preserve the memory of what always in the end perishes, life and great deeds. I wonder what the man with the scythe did with my crosses. I wonder if they still exist. Yes, it was a child's effort against time, commented Auden, and perhaps the archaeologist is just that child grown up.
All right, so then I thought I would move on to the one that Eiseley calls the Rudd Mansion, but is actually Maple Lodge. It's important to know when you're reading Eiseley's nonfiction that he changes names and locations sometimes. Don't take it always as gospel. So this location that for some reason he refers to as the Rudd Mansion is actually the Maple Lodge in Lincoln. I found that there's a number of other uh, circumstances like that, but let's play the Maple Lodge one.
Lauren Eiseley's family was poor, but lived near a much wealthier neighborhood. One of the most impressive homes in his vicinity was what he referred to in his autobiography, All the Strange Hours, as the Rudd Mansion. It is actually called Maple Lodge, located at 20th and Euclid Street. Lauren remembers rummaging through the trash incinerator behind the mansion and finding a special play item.
I played alone in those days. I took to creeping up alleys and peering through hedges. I was not miserable. There was a wonderful compensating secrecy about these activities. I had little shelters and hedgerows, and I knew and perfected secret entrances and exits into the most amazing worlds. There was, for example, the Rudd Mansion. I never saw the inside of it, but I made the discovery that in a stone incinerator, back of the house and close up to the immense hedge through which I had worked a passage, there were often burned toys. Apparently the Rudd family lived with greater prodigality and cast recklessly away what to me were invaluable possessions. I got in the habit of creeping through the hedge at nightfall and scratching in the ashes for bits of mechano sets and other little treasures which I would bear homeward. One frosty night in early fall, I turned up a gold wheel. It was not gold really, but I pretended it was. To me it represented all those things, perhaps in a dim way life itself, that are denied by poverty. The wheel had been part of a child's construction set of some sort. It was grooved to run on a track, and it had a screw on the hub to enable it to be fitted adjustably to an axle. The amalgam of which it was made was hard and golden, and it had come untouched through the incinerator fires. In my childish world it was a wonderful object, and I haunted the incinerator for many nights thereafter, hoping I might secure the remaining wheel. The flow of toys declined, however, and I never found the second golden wheel. The one I had found became a sort of fetish, which I carried around with me.
Okay, so and I thought I'd end the Lincoln section with the country club ponds, where Eiseley almost drowned. We filmed this in the summer, and every year I think when it's frozen and snowy there, I want to go back and refilm it because much of the episode he describes took place in the winter time. So there's this seasonal contrast there. But I have maybe this winter I'll go back and film some wintry scenes there.
Just south of Eiseley's home in Lincoln, the city ended and open country began. He spent much of his youth roaming in the fields and along the creeks in this area. Now much of that area is part of Irvingdale Park, whose stream was a common playing area for young Lauren. Just south of the park, across Van Dorn Street, lies a pond, now part of a golf course, that was the scene of one of Eiseley's most harrowing memories, as he describes it in All the Strange Hours.
The countryside was open in those days. On one visit to Lincoln several years ago, I thought it might be good to tramp out to that old pond where so many generations of boys had swum, waded, or collected. Forbidding fences warned me away. It was now part of a country club. I speak no ill. If a country club had not acquired the ponds and landscaped the greens, all would have been filled in by suburban developments in any case. But this was all wild once, and the feeling that is left is somehow lost and bittersweet. The pond is there. It is not the same pond. It is reserved. It has been tamed for rich men to play beside. Either that or the developers come. One takes one's choice. No, not really. One has no choice. On that winter day so long ago, I almost lost my life. I arrived at the pond and chopped an experimental hole near the shore, where I worked my clumsy mud dredging apparatus back and forth. My plan was successful. I was drawing up a few sleeping water boatmen, whirligig beetles, and dragonfly larvae, along with more other microscopic animalcules. These I placed in my lard buckets and prepared to go home and begin the stocking of my little aquariums. A forced spring had come early to my captives. There were skates on a strap hanging around my neck, and before leaving, I thought I would take one quick run over the pond. It was a very cold day, the ice firm. I had no reason to anticipate disaster. I made 2 swift passages out over what I knew to be the deepest water. On the second pass, as I stepped up speed, there was a sudden, instantaneous splintering of ice. The leg to which I had just applied skating pressure went hip deep into the water. I came down upon my face. I lay there a moment half stunned. No one was with me. What if the rest of the ice broke? Even if one held onto the edge, one would freeze very quickly. I waited anxiously, trying not to extend the ice fracture by struggling. I was scared enough to yell, but it was useless. No one but a boy infused with the momentary idea of becoming a creator would be out on a day like this. Slowly, I slid forward, arms spread, and withdrew my soaking leg from the hole. I must have struck an ice bubble with that one foot. The freezing weather fortunately permitted no general collapse of the ice. In one sweating moment I was safe, but I had to jog all the way home with my closed buckets. After such an event, there was no one's arms in which to fall at home. If one did, there would be only hysterical admonitions, and I would be lucky to be allowed out. Slowly, my inner life was continuing to adjust to this fact. I had to rely on silence. It was like creeping away from death out of an ice hole, an inch at a time. You did it alone.
Okay, so let's move out west now. Well, let me first. Oops, I hate it when the maps do that. Just drive out Interstate 80. Oops, I've gone too far, haven't I? There we are. I was going to Denver instead of up to Gearing there. So we have these marked out in the sort of the panhandle portion of Nebraska there, where the South Party did a lot of their work, and I will pull up a couple here. First, the general one about the Wildcat Hills, introduction to that Wildcat Hills area.
During Loren Eiseley's college years, he spent parts of 3 summers in the early 1930s working on paleontological expeditions with the South Party of the Nebraska State Museum.
This is Loren here.
These expeditions roamed from the Wildcat Hills south of Scottsbluff to the remote Badlands of South Dakota. The South Party unearthed a wide variety of fossil remains, including oreodonts, mastodons, rhinos, camels, and the tools and spear points of early humans. Eiseley, the impressionistic and moody young poet, was deeply moved by his experience digging up fossil remains in the rugged reaches of the shortgrass prairie, and his time on these expeditions served as inspiration and material for much of the writing he was later to do. Indeed, during the time he was digging bones, Eiseley was also making notes of his experiences, notes he was later to draw upon for much of his mature writing. Several of his colleagues remarked to Gail Christensen that Eiseley, though not required to keep field notes of the digs, nevertheless kept a notebook handy, and they suspected he was not keeping the kind of notes the others kept, and that he was indeed recording things that he observed, whether it was mountains, flowers, stones, or whatever, and that he was writing down some of his deep thoughts. Indeed, they were correct. Many years later, Eiseley remarked on the importance of his time on these expeditions in his memoir, All the Strange Hours.
Few people outside the realm of paleontology realize that these runneled, sun-baked ridges of western Nebraska, which extend far into South Dakota, are one of the great fossil beds of the North American age of mammals. Bones lay in the washes or projected from cliffs. Titanotheres, dirk-toothed cats, oreodonts, to mention but a few, had left their bones in these sterile clays. The place was as haunted as the Valley of the Kings, but by great beasts who had ruled the planet when man was only a wispy experiment in the highlands of Kenya. These creatures had never had the misfortune to look upon a human face. Most of what we knew of mammalian evolution in North America had come from this region. All the great paleontologists had worked here. New species of animals still occasionally turned up. The place enchanted me. I have an almost eidetic recall for those solitary years. I owe my presence there to C. Bertrand Schultz, a fellow student in geology and anthropology, who later became field director and still later director of the Nebraska State Museum. He was one of those fortunate people who knew his course and did not wander. Today we are both approaching the shadows of retirement. He is one of the leading authorities on the successive faunas and geology of the Middle Border. I am profoundly grateful to both him and his predecessor, Dr. Erwin Barber. Much of what seared its way into my brain and into my writing came about because Schultz prevailed upon the museum director to allow me to work with the field party. In the timeless land, I could remain hidden.
Not everybody realizes Nebraska has that kind of a landscape. A lot of people think it's just corn and soybeans. So obviously one of the most famous finds of Eiseley's was the innocent assassin skull. And we have a pretty good, like I said, we have a pretty good idea where that was found, but we're not 100%, we don't have the exact, Big's holding up his version of it there. But I think we got pretty close to where it was.
Undoubtedly, Lauren Eiseley's most famous paleontological find was the skull of a Nimravus brachiops, commonly though erroneously called a saber-toothed tiger, with its tooth embedded into the bone of another of its kind. This find resulted in his most famous poem, The Innocent Assassins, in which he pondered the nature of violence and weaponry in a way that was clearly influenced by the Cold War and the nuclear arms race of his day. In his biography of Eiseley, Gail Christensen says this fossil was discovered in Toadstool Park, but research into the documents of the South Party make it clear that it was discovered on the edge of the Wildcat Hills in a location referred to informally as Black Hank's Canyon. A lengthy exposed band of Oligocene-era siltstone made this region an ideal location for the South Party to search for fossils.
Once in the sun-fierce badlands of the West, in that strange country of volcanic ash and cones, runneled by rains, cut into purgatorial shapes, where nothing grows, no seeds spring, no beast moves, we found a saber-tooth, most ancient cat, far down in all those cellars of dead time. What was it made the mystery there? We dug until the full length of the striking saber showed, beautiful as Toledo steel, the fine serrations still present along the blade, a masterpiece of murderous art conceived by those same forces that heaved mountains up from the flat bottoms of crustaceous seas. Attentive in a little silent group, we squatted there. This was no ordinary death, though 40 million years lay between us and that most gaping snarl. Deep down to the root of fractured scapula hung on the mighty saber-tooth undetached. Two beasts had died in mortal combat, for the bone had never been released. There was no chance this cat had ever used its fangs again, or eaten. Died there, in short, though others of its kind grew larger, suddenly were gone, while the great darkness went about its task, mountains thrust up, mountains worn down, till this lost battle was exposed to eyes the stalking saber-tooths had never seen.
All right, so I was glad to hear that last Neanderthal get mentioned earlier. I thought I'd end my showings of these on with the last Neanderthal site. This is a slightly longer one because there's actually two locations here, the last Neanderthal site and the Rhino Quarry site. I should say on the Rhino Quarry site, the the trip that the Eiseley Society had made like 10 or 12 years ago out there, we went up to the site. Most of the pictures of that site, like this one on the cover here, are from that trip. Subsequently, when I went out there with Emily and we had two other grad students who accompanied us, I took them up on the hill and I was sure I could find the Rhino Quarry site, and we traipsed around and around and around. And I kept saying, it's just over that hill. It's just behind that hill. It's just around here somewhere. And I know we must have been within 50 feet of it, but I could not find this precise site where this Rhino Quarry is located. I felt really embarrassed, and they still tease me about taking them on this wild goose chase looking for the Rhino Quarry. But fortunately, I'd been there before and got photographs of it there, and we do have some video of the landscape up there. So.
In the summer of 1932, the South Party discovered a quarry on a ridgetop north of Bridgeport, Nebraska, that contained a large number of bones of Miocene-era rhinos. They spent several months excavating in and around the site. The quarry was on the farm of the impoverished Brubaker family, and the South Party camped in the Indian Creek Valley a short way downstream from the family's sod house. They regularly purchased milk and other supplies from the family, whose daughter would often make the deliveries. After the South Party left the site, they paid the Brubaker family for the use of their property. With that money, the family moved out of their ramshackle soddy and built a much more elaborate sod house with multiple windows and 2 doors, an unheard-of luxury in a sod house, especially during the Depression. That house still stands on the farm, inhabited by the current lessee of the property. Eiseley related his experiences at this location in his essay, The Last Neanderthal.
It happened in the West, somewhere in that wide, drought-ridden land of empty coulees that carry in sudden spates of flood the boulders of the Rockies toward the sea. I suppose that, with the outward flight of population, the region is as wild now as it was then, some 40 years ago. It would be useless to search for the place upon a map, though I have tried. Too many years and too many uncertain miles lie behind all bone hunters. There was no town to fix upon a road map. There was only a sod house tucked behind a butte, out of the prevailing wind. And there was a little spring-fed pond in a grassy meadow. That I remember. Bone hunting is not really a very romantic occupation. One walks day after day along miles of frequently unrewarding outcrop. One grows browner, leaner, and tougher, it is true, but one is far from the bright lights, and the prospect, barring a big strike, like a mammoth, is always to abandon camp and go on. It was really a gypsy profession, then, for those who did the field collecting. In this case, we did not go on. There was an eroding hill in the vicinity, and on top of that hill, just below sod cover, were the foot bones, hundreds of them, of some lost tertiary species of American rhinoceros. It is useless to ask why we found only foot bones, or why we gathered the mineralized things in such fantastic quantities that they must still lie stacked in some museum storeroom. Maybe the creatures had been immured standing up in a water hole, and in the millions of succeeding years, the rest of the carcasses had eroded away from the hilltop stratum. But there were the foot bones, and the orders had come down, so we dug carpals and metacarpals till we cursed like an army platoon that headquarters has forgotten. There was just one diversion, the spring, and the pond in the meadow. There, under the bank, we cooled our milk and butter purchased from the Saudi inhabitants. There we swam and splashed after work. The country people were reserved and kept mostly to themselves. They were uninterested in the dull bones on the hilltop, unenlivened by skills or treasure. After all, there was reason for their reserve. We must have appeared, by their rural standards, harmless, but undoubtedly touched in the head. The barrier of reserve was never broken. The surly farmer kept to his parched acres and estimated to his profit our damage to his uncultivated hilltop. The slatternly wife tended to a few scrawny chickens. In that ever-blowing landscape, their windmill largely ran itself. Only a stocky, barefoot girl of 20 sometimes came hesitantly down the path to our camp to deliver eggs. Some 60 days had drifted by upon that hillside. I began to remember the remark of an old fossil hunter who, in his time, had known the Gold Coast and the African veldt. When calico begins to look like silk, he had once warned over a fire in the Sierras, it is time to go home. But enough of that. We were not bad young people. The girl shyly brought us the eggs, the butter, and the bacon, and then withdrew. Only after some little time did her appearance begin to strike me as odd. Men are accustomed to men in their various color variations around the world. When the past intrudes into a modern setting, however, it is less apt to be visible, because to see it demands knowledge of the past, and the past is always camouflaged when it wears the clothes of the present. The girl came slowly down the hill one evening, and it struck me suddenly how alone she looked, and how, well, alien she also appeared. Our cook was stoking up the evening fire, and as the shadows leapt and flickered, I, leaning invisibly against a rock, was suddenly transported 100,000 years into the past. The shadows and their dancing highlights were the cause of it. They had swept the present out of sight. That girl coming reluctantly down the pathway to the fire was removed from us in time, and subconsciously she knew it as I did. By modern standards, she was not pretty, and the gingham dress she wore, if anything, defined the difference. Short, thick-set, and massive, her body was still not the body of a typical peasant woman. Her head, thrust a little forward against the light, was massive-boned. Along the eye orbits at the edge of the frontal bone, I could see outlined in the flames an armored protuberance that, particularly in women, had vanished before the close of the Vermian ice. She swung her head almost like a great muzzle beneath its curls, and I was struck by the low, bun-shaped breadth at the back. Along her exposed arms one could see a flash of golden hair. No, we are out of time, I thought quickly. We are each and every one displaced. She is the last Neanderthal, and she doesn't know what to do. We are those who eliminated her long ago. It is like an old scene endlessly reenacted. Only the chipped stones and the dead game are lacking.
Okay, so those were all the ones I was planning on showing. Bing always likes to point out that this essay looks different now that we're aware that so many of us actually have a sizable percentage of Neanderthal DNA in ourselves there. It suddenly seems less imaginative and there. I remember reading somewhere that people who knew that Brubaker girl thought she looked perfectly normal. So this seems to have been more a matter of Lauren's imagination than anything else. So are there questions? Are there any questions or comments or anything people want to engage with? Here, maybe I'll turn off the share. Either in the chat.
I was going to ask you, Tom, it's Sue here.
All right.
Might you extend at some point into like northeastern Kansas?
With Eiseley?
Yeah.
I don't, at this point, I don't have any plans to build on this. But maybe there's a few of them, like I said, doing the wintry scene at the pond, but there are locations that are never, the one place we thought about going, but didn't have time was the Lindenmeyer site that's in Colorado. It would have just added too much extra time to our trip there. That's the main one I've been thinking of doing. Yeah. But I guess there were some locations in Kansas when he was teaching there that he worked on as well. Yeah, but at this point, I don't have any plans to. I'm sort of done with this in that regard. Although one of the nice things about digital projects is you can, unlike a book, once the book's published, it's you can't really do much with it. But this is something that could be updated and expanded, um, and even somebody might want to do, we could do the stuff around Philadelphia, the locations are in back east. I mean, we did get funding from Nebraska Humanities, so I felt we were a little bit confined geographically there, but certainly there wouldn't be any reason it couldn't be expanded. Maybe it'll be a retirement project for me, so.
Yeah. ArcGIS stuff, the story mapping stuff is really great to use with students now. And I could see that down the line, things could be added on that the students themselves create.
Sure, yeah.
And when I'm just kind of playing around with it now, so I don't know enough about what happens when ArcGIS creates an improved version of this and everything. Does the whole map have to be redone?
Oh, I don't know. It's at this point we haven't had to do anything. I did. I mean, I hadn't looked at it in a while, and I noticed some of the images aren't showing up that ought to be. So I'm going to contact the CDRH and see if there isn't some little glitch. But like you said, sometimes things get updated in the system that's posting it, but you don't know that, and you don't update your own your own stuff, so it starts to get old quickly there. That is the upside of digital work is you can constantly rework them. The downside is the technology advances, they start to become out of date much more quickly than a book would. Yeah. When I was doing I'd mentioned I'd done some videos for my class, and what I was actually doing for that class was just sort of environment. Well, actually, it was Great Plain, tallgrass prairie writers. I was reading from the works of tallgrass prairie writers out in the prairie, and so I thought about doing like just something like this that was environmental writers of the Great Plains, that would include Eiseley but not be limited to Eiseley, and just film them. And I got totally sucked into my little my iMovie and my camera, and it was just amazing what you can do now with just your phone and and the program on your computer in terms of editing. So
Tom, this is Derek. I think this is a fabulous project. I'm envious of you and your students for having the opportunity to do this. And I'm wondering what the two students who mostly worked with you, did they share any of their thoughts about their experiences?
well, I mean, I think for Ariana, who did the voice, I mean, she didn't know anything about Eiseley, so she learned about Eiseley. She learned something there, but she's moved on to Tucson, and she's down there, and I haven't been much contact with her. Emily is still around; she's still in the program. She's still working for the Cather Archive there, and she's gotten into Eiseley. She didn't know anything about Eiseley either when I roped her into this, but she's I just went to a conference. It was on Zoom, but she delivered a paper, and her paper was about Eiseley. It was sort of a personal narrative about Eiseley and about going to places, so it was definitely inspired by this. So I felt like it had definitely been quite influential for her.
Good.
Yeah.
And is this all on the Eiseley website?
I think it's linked to from the Eiseley website, but it's hosted at the Center for Digital Research in the Humanities. So you click on the link at the Eiseley site, and it will take you over there. Yeah.
So John and Jim, you're both from the East Coast. And not having been out here, what we were intending with this was to give people who happen to admire Lauren Eiseley, and you too, David, coming from the East Coast as well, an opportunity of uh, gaining an insight into what were the factors that led into his creativity and genius and allowing it to flourish. And so hopefully what this does from Tom's selection is gives you an opportunity to gain an insight into the man. I know John read Eiseley about the same time I did. I won't say how many decades ago, but both as college students. And so I think that hopefully this will provide other people who are Eiseley fans the opportunity to understand a little bit about him without having to journey all the way to Nebraska, especially as we begin to gain a larger national and international presence, hopefully in the time ahead. And I'm kind of curious to see what the rest of you felt about using this Zoom, live Zoom format in terms of this, our first public meeting. Any impressions and any suggestions for improvements? We'd certainly like to hear that. And I see our furthest joiner is from Hawaii. So I'll introduce my sister, Judy Lau. So she's joining us from Oahu. And it's a pleasure to see Susan Maher again, who is a former member of on our board of directors. And so so it's delightful to meet you, see you again, Sue.
One of the things you mentioned, being that I, as part, sort of in the background on this project, is we have here at the university the Center for Great Plains Studies, and one of their major projects has been promoting ecotourism. And they're mainly thinking of ecotourism like going to stay at a ranch or going bird watching for the sandhill cranes or something like that. But I've been trying to, and Sue was actually on a panel we organized for a conference with them, of trying to generate a sort of nature writer ecotourism or writer tourism, more generally, so that, you know, the obvious one here is Cather in Red Cloud, but it would also be possible to find, and you know, it would be nice to think of people coming to, especially, I think, I mean, it's fun to walk around Lincoln and stuff, but going out to the Wildcat Hills is really when you get the real feel for his major work there. And, you know, and there is a tourism potential of people coming, staying out there, going to some of the archaeological locations. Obviously, some of them are up, you know, like this pointed out, on private land, but there's enough that's available for access that people can do that. And so it's partly also hoping to encourage a little bit of that kind of tourism when we're back traveling again.
You know, Tom, because I was talking about East End, Saskatchewan during that ecotourism panel that we were on, you could, which has great paleontological finds up there as well. And you could almost do something that goes from East End, Saskatchewan down through the Black Hills, where you've got Linda Hasselstrom and Dan O'Brien, down into, I mean, you could really do a trail.
You could do an environmental literature tourist trail that would include, that Eiseley could be one of the diamonds in the necklace of the trip there. Yeah.
You know, well, that's something that Ray Boyce actually proposed, something along these lines. So
yeah, well, there's the Fossil Freeway that's
Yeah.
set up. That's just that goes from the Wildcat Hills up into South Dakota. So there's that as a tourism potential there. Yeah,
that's pretty well developed.
yeah.
So, well, I'm really delighted to see so many old friends and to so many new friends. And I thank you all for coming and joining us this afternoon. For joining I guess we might as well close this with the caravan, joining our caravan this afternoon. So that phrase from Eiseley, we have all joined a caravan at a certain point, you might say, and we will travel as far as we can, but we cannot in one lifetime see all that we would wish to see, or have all that we would hunger to know, or learn all that we would hunger to know. So I think that's a good way to close our little presentation here. I think Tom and I would be happy to just stay on to visit with anybody that would like to talk some more about Eiseley, or might have other questions or comments that they would like to make. And I know that some in the Eiseley Society have been talking about our next public meeting, which